Welcome to the 2020 Aberdeen Norway Gateway, our 7th annual Aberdeen Norway Gateway, and our inaugural digital gateway. We're just letting the people in now, and we've got a lot of people joining us, and we'll just be starting with our speakers very, very soon. Okay, if we could just ask a couple of housekeeping points, please. If you could please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking, it just saves blowback, and only the speaker that's presenting will be on at the time. If you have any questions on each of the speakers' presentations, we will circle back to them in the Q&A at the end. If you could please pop them in the chat, that would be great. We like questions, so, and please feel free to add any messages or notes about your company or wishes to others in the chat box as well. So please feel free to use the chat box throughout. Okay, so just very quickly, today's speakers, we've got the Lord Provost of Aberdeen and the current president of the World Energy City Partnership. We've got the British Ambassador to Norway, Richard Wood. We've got Leif Johan, president of ONS and former mayor of Stavanger for many years. We've got Ed Gardine from Safewell Solutions, a Scottish company expanding internationally. And we've got Tony Flanagan from Brand-Based UK, a Norwegian company which is established in the UK. So without further ado, we've got 100 people joined us and rising. So I'd like to kick off today's speakers, please. And I'd like to hand over to the Lord Provost of Aberdeen, current president of the World Energy City Partnership, Barney Crockett, to welcome us all and set the scene today. Lord Provost.
Thank you very much, Brett, and thanks everybody who's coming along to the inaugural digital meeting. It's very exciting for me, an enormous turnout, enormous interest, which doesn't surprise me. I think that Aberdeen, our very closest international links are with Norway, and in particular our colleagues in Stavanger who are with us today. I think we've got a tremendous range of speakers there, and I look forward to hearing all of it and taking part in any discussion and questions at the end. I think Aberdeen was described in the New York Times as a city with one foot on the seafloor. I think that's very true of our colleagues' cities in Norway as well as ourselves, and we have a lot in common to discuss. And I think that I mentioned our very closest partnerships with Norway, and I'm sure that's going to continue no matter what the vicissitudes of international relationships are. I'm a regular visitor myself to Norway, particularly to the far north. So all my friends there, if there's anybody from the Finnmark region, look forward to seeing you again all soon, and look forward to the discussion. I think one thing I'm proud of, the depth of the relationship, one thing that I'm particularly proud of as Lord Provost is I was just recently told that our Norwegian Seamen's Church is the busiest in the world outside Norway, which is just an unbelievable fact, and take great interest in their activities in the city as well. So thanks very much, everybody, and let's have a great Gateway event. Thank you.
Thanks, Lord Provost, for being with us and for being able to stay with us as well. That's great, and participating in the Q&A. Okay, I'd like to introduce our second speaker now, and I'm delighted that we have the British Ambassador to Norway, Richard Wood, with us today, who's based in the embassy, the British Embassy in Oslo. So, Richard, I'd like to hand over to you now, please.
Thank you, Brett, and it's a great pleasure to follow the Lord Provost and see him on screen. I was in Stavanger yesterday, or as we like to call it, Europe's second greatest oil city, talking to industry contacts, and it struck me that we were not at ONS, nor are we able to meet today face to face, obviously, and I think both of those things are symbols of the challenges we've all faced and the disruption in the last few months. Norway has perhaps had a relatively easier time of it, at least as far as the spread of the disease is concerned. This industry has been less affected than some, but still it's been a difficult time for this industry in our corner of Northwest Europe. It's been a triple whammy of sorts, I would call it. General difficulties in operating related to COVID-19 disruption. 2, there's been a general downturn in the global economy and industrial demand. And of course, there's a stubbornly low oil price. But I think it's worth remembering where the Norwegian economy was just as COVID hit. I think there'd been solid growth since the autumn of 2016, and exports were up, employment was up, there was consistent wage growth off the back of tighter labour market conditions, and investment on the Norwegian shelf and oil service exports had also been expanding. So against that backdrop, perhaps not surprising that the Norwegian economy has weathered the COVID storm better than many, but still, the economy went into deficit for the first time since 1994. Norway has seen the highest unemployment since World War II, although many of those figures were perhaps furlough jobs, and it remains to be seen how soon some of those will come back, or whether in fact there's been a bit of a tipping point for a longer term restructuring. Also, the government raided the oil fund by a larger amount than the normal cap to pay for a revised budget, and that was in part 100 billion Norwegian kroner in tax deferrals for the oil and gas industry to boost liquidity. That was not uncontroversial in Norway. Too little, too late, said some in the industry. The opposition said that that money should have gone to individuals and small businesses. But what it did was create a period of perhaps better predictability than we otherwise might have seen in the industry, which has undoubtedly, I think, staved off higher numbers of layoffs and cancelled investment decisions. The temptation after a major shock to the economy is always to focus down on the basics. Innovation and R&D can get squeezed, and I think Norway's emergency budget in May saw, for example, a reduction in renewable energy assistance by 38%. But both the UK and Norway are committed to promoting a green recovery in line with Paris principles and Sustainable Development Goals. And Norway announced a 3.6 billion kroner plan in that emergency budget that I mentioned to prioritize R&D, entrepreneurship, the supply industry, and the maritime sector. Again, there was criticism of that, in particular the scale, 3.6 billion kroner compared to the 100 billion for the oil and gas rescue package. But there was also criticism of the scope. No mention, for example, of CCUS projects, which the government had originally said would be ready for development this summer. But during this period, I think it's fair to say that all governments have faced some very difficult choices. Now, the green shift, as it's called in Norway, is happening faster, in fact, in the UK than anywhere else. The writing into law of a commitment to net zero emissions by 2050, you shouldn't underestimate this. It has changed the whole culture of government, and I would suggest regulators as well. There's been rapidly increased government intervention and assistance for renewables, as many of you will have seen. Increased focus on sustainability across the whole of the industrial policy, not just energy. And there are new innovative measures around carbon accounting and green finance and many other things coming fast at us down the track. Now, much of this has been aimed at the COP26 climate conference, delayed until now November 21. And that is part of what's focusing government minds, I think, on this agenda. It is the #1 foreign policy priority. And there will be a number of major policy announcements designed to show UK leadership on the climate leading up to November. Green transition, the green energy transition has obviously been adopted as one of the main COP26 priorities. And that will obviously focus on how to accelerate the growth of renewables within the energy mix. But also, we're looking at innovation in energy storage technologies, smart and no-waste electricity grids, zero-emission vehicles, eco-friendly buildings, and many other things besides. And the rationale for this, the government is trying to persuade many other countries, is that there is an economic dividend for being a rapid mover on the green shift. Green energy is becoming a lot cheaper. And with the right investment in skills and job creation, it is a job creating industry. A report earlier this year found that actually increased investment in renewables could increase jobs in the sector by 42 million globally by 2050, 4 times more than today. Now, the OGA and the Oil and Gas UK are both looking at how the UKCS can successfully be an important part of the country's energy transition, looking at platform electrification, gas to wire, CCUS, hydrogen, and offshore energy hubs. The industry's roadmap for 2035 is an impressive blueprint, I would say, on its contribution to net zero. And I like particularly the emphasis on partnership with the tech sector and on the need to develop people and skills for a rapid green shift. The embassy is supporting those things very strongly. Some of the things we see this feeding into, an increased look at interconnection, which can even out supply of renewables across the markets. We have one under construction to England, and we were hoping for the go-ahead for another to Scotland. Hopefully that will still come. I think for the UK, CCUS is key to decarbonising. We have an MOU with Norway from 2018, which contributes to closer collaboration. I'd like to see that accelerate even further. The Norwegian CCS full-scale project will be extremely important for Europe as a whole, and we're working closely with them on that. And that leads obviously on to CO2 storage and hydrogen. In Scotland, Acorn CCS, with its associated hydrogen production project, will be the UK's first CO2 licence. And longer term, the UK just needs to convert its domestic gas heating systems to hydrogen if we're to stand any chance of meeting Paris goals. And I think that and H2 Aberdeen will help reinforce Aberdeen's position as an energy city in the new era, both now supporting existing industries and looking ahead at future technology. Less relevant to many of you perhaps, but as an embassy, as an example, we are also working feverishly with Norway on electric vehicle usage, on electric commercial aviation, autonomous electric ships, and many, many more. And all of those are joint UK-Norway projects. So I see that when we partner up on new technology and a vigorous approach at policy, we can do great things together. What can this embassy do for many of you? The partnership, symbiosis almost, of Aberdeen and Stavanger is obvious and mentioned by the Lord Provost. My colleagues in the embassy's trade and investment team are even more frequently in Stavanger and Aberdeen than I managed to be, and we will continue to do that and to put people together who we feel can collaborate closely. Scottish Development International are appointing a new officer in Stavanger imminently, and contrary to what you hear from many, this is an area where the British government and the Scottish government work very closely together. Now, I know that most fruitful relationships start with networking at ONS, Offshore Europe, or events like this. It's obviously a bit more difficult to do now, but the embassy is standing by to continue to help put people in contact and to advise on the Norwegian market, for example, and how you can access that. I think finally, I would say that as the government shifts focus from oil and gas increasingly towards renewables, that is probably where I see some of the greatest opportunities in the supply chain. Many have adapted over time to move into this space. Arcot Solutions has restructured to create a whole separately listed renewables company. Others have dedicated renewables parts of their existing business. Equinor has separated out renewables in its latest earnings reports, and I see this kind of trend continuing. Companies in both UK and Norway are proactively seeking suppliers that are able to deliver green and low carbon technology. And I think that partnership with the tech sector, as I've said before, is something that's going to be hugely important in the future. Also in public procurement, interestingly. And that innovation and technology will be key to economic growth generally. So AI, machine learning, digitalization, and high-tech engineering. Aberdeen.
Richard, sorry to interrupt. I know you sound like you're finishing up. I know you said you're coming to the end, but that's almost at time, just so you know.
Thank you very much. I literally am finishing, so almost at time. Aberdeen will continue, I think, to be at the forefront of that. It has always, the North Sea has always led the way in this industry in being first with technology, the first to adapt, and is the most resilient part of the industry in the world. Aberdeen, and with its close partnerships to many cities, but particularly to Norway and Stavanger, is uniquely placed, I think, to see some of those changes coming, anticipate those changes, and make the most of a joint industry across the North Sea. I promise I've finished now. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Brett, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Richard, for making the time. I know it's a busy week, ONS week, and it was great to hear your views on now and the future, so thank you for that. Okay, we'd like to move on now to our third speaker. So having heard from the Lord Provost of Aberdeen and from the British Ambassador to Norway, we now, who better to hear from with an overview of where things are at in 2020 and looking ahead, is the President of ONS, a Gateway regular and former Mayor of Stavanger, Leif Johan. Leif Johan, welcome.
Thank you, Brett, for your kind invitation and the opportunity to give a few words about what's happening on the Norwegian continental shelf for the time being. And of course, I should have said, wish you were here.
Yeah, I wish I was in Stavanger this week too. Thank you.
So, but we were ready for ONS 2020. It would have been the biggest exhibition since 2014. We had 700 different speakers being ready to give their presentations. But then this COVID-19 came and changed the year of 2020 totally. I'm glad to be here together with you. I hope you all are safe and sound. And this week we have had the ONS goes digital. It's been a new experience, but it's been a great experience. We have had 55 leaders, politicians, executives, experts, and Barney, politicians could be experts as well. So that's a good combination, being here and all giving their flavor of what's happening within the energy industry and how would the future be. Our digital version is free for everyone. You will find it at ons.no if you would like. And you could, even in Aberdeen, I think we will have some evenings during the fall, being a bit rain, a bit dark, and that could be an opportunity to use for that. So what we are seeing and facing in Norway, and Ambassador mentioned that as well, the energy transition is catching more and more pace every day, much faster than the outlook projected just a few years back. That's the reality. And we have a global challenge to solve. In ONS, we choose together as our team for this year's event, and never ever have 8 letters in the world have higher value. And we choose that a year and a half ago. But what we see today, the world, leaders being standing far away from each other, the energy industry, how to reduce cost, the pandemic we are facing, we need to be together as one common world, as one common industry, as Aberdeen and Stavanger, etc. What's values? My main topic should be the Norwegian continental shelf. The Norwegian continental shelf is diversified. It's within oil and gas, but I could assure you, like you, we do a lot of within offshore wind. We have a full transition going on. We have wind farms, the Tampen field. We have CCS project, Northern Light, who won the ONS Innovation Award for big company, a project with Shell, Total, and Equinor doing together. And hydrogen projects combined with still strong presence in conventional oil and gas development and production as the future roadmap. And let me just assure that ONS, NCS, the Norwegian Continental Shelf, is still a very attractive place to do business. We have, you could trust the authorities in Norway. You know that we have high tax, and they are constantly high. We have a predictable framework, political stability, and we have active awards of acreage. So it's a good place for energy players in the years to come. We have a diversity of E&P players being extremely important. Telling that the large international companies are still present, but we have also a mid-size range. We have independent companies, a lot of great companies being there together with the smaller companies. It's this diversification what happened for the last years on the Norwegian Continental Shelf being as important for the future success of the Norwegian Continental Shelf. And of course, the most important thing is the resources, the potential for discoveries. That's the fundament for making the shelf attractive. And the NPD says that estimated only 50% of the total resources being produced to date. We still anticipate a high level of production and activity on the Norwegian Continental Shelf for several decades. And of course, coupled with predictable framework, political stability, and active awards, it's going to be a good place for all the players. But the pandemic, as the ambassador mentioned, hit the nation and our oil industry with full force. And it has been a dramatic spring and summer for the industry. But thanks to our politicians, the government, and the parliament, the industry landed a decent tax relief that will keep investments in new projects coming with good speed in the coming years. And we already see the results of that package. Large investments have been made in producing fields to improve recovery. And at the end of 2019, 87 fields were in production. A combination of COVID-19 and low oil prices is expected to result in a reduced activity level over the next few years. But the tax package will and have to stimulate new developments, both conventional and renewable projects, first of all related to offshore wind, CCS, and hydrogen. And for the next few years, the total production of the Norwegian Continental Shelf is expected to remain relatively stable. Production from new fields that comes on stream will compensate for the decline in production from already producing fields. Production is assumed to increase from 2020, and it's estimated that the production in 2024 will be close to the record-breaking year 2004. A lot of this has to do, of course, with Johan Sverdrup field that came on stream last year, and Equinor, with their partners, will launch their phase 2 part of the project in a few years in time. And Johan Sverdrup on peak will actually be 30% of the Norwegian production. That's very significant number. In 2019, last year, the fields Oda, Utgard, and Trestakk came on stream, as well as Johan Sverdrup, as I just mentioned. At year end, 13 field developments were ongoing, 8 in the North Sea, close to the UK sector, 4 in the Norwegian Sea, and 1 in the Barents Sea. Now there is 11 projects ongoing, and I will be coming back to them. In addition, there were about 95 discoveries that could be or being considered for development at year end. Most of them are relatively small, and will be developed as satellites to existing fields. Most of them are, as I mentioned, small. Standalone developments are planned for the largest discoveries, but a number of smaller discoveries could be built near existing infrastructure, using some new infrastructure throughout collaboration with different development solutions. In the year of 2019, investments number increased to about 150 billion, but you're expected to be a bit lower in 2020. Starting in 2021, a further decline in investment is expected to around 115 billion NOK in the years to come. The lower level of investments expected in the coming years is influenced by a combination of COVID-19 and lower oil price. It's not the resources, but what happened actually this spring. Several ongoing projects, both related to new find developments and fields in operation, would nevertheless contribute to keeping the activity level stable in the coming years. Despite COVID-19 and expected lower price, there will be a good and high activity in the industry, and the petroleum industry will continue to be Norway's largest and most important industry for the foreseeable future. New projects on fields in operation, as well as infill drilling, will result in a relatively high level of activity. And in addition to this, and of course, as you know, the activities on existing fields, there are several new fields under development, and others are expected to be declined for development. So if you could see, Stacey, and just mention for you some of the fields then being ongoing. And it's not a complete list, but it's a list made by as good as possible. Here you will see the different projects coming up, and you'll see we have, of course, projects being quite close to be open, and we have projects for the future. We don't have any new Johan Sverdrup, not at least for the time being, to my knowledge, but we have huge fields, and we have complicated fields, which is going to need a lot of investment and a lot of competence from companies being in the audience today. And page 6 will show the main team. Stacey, please. The last one was I could see on the Balder future, the Balder Ringhorn, and I could end with that, Brett, because what's actually the story? License 001 in Norway was given to Exxon, and it was named Balder. Just outside my window, I could see on the production ship, the FPSO Jotun, being there right now, being totally renewable, setting up in a new style, a lot of investment. The company is not Exxon, they left Norway, they sold out. There's a new company called Vår Energy with Eni as the main stakeholder. That's a company who have taken over the asset from Exxon, and is actually starting with the first license, 001. And it's ongoing in business for a long time. And I think that's actually the story about the Norwegian continental shelf. We're going to see more of that to come. A lot of activity around the mature areas with production ships, with activity have been, new discoveries, new technology, improved oil recovery, and more investments. So let the Balder license, the first license, be my last word for this afternoon. And I'm so glad to be together with you, and all the best for the future, and let's stay together.
Thank you very much, Leif, for making the time today. I know it's a very busy week, ONS week, and especially with an extensive digital schedule of events, awards, and speakers going on throughout this week. And we really appreciate that overview. It was very interesting. Thank you for that. Okay, we now are moving on to a couple of real live case studies, so to speak, as we always speak. And today we've got an example of a Scottish UK business that's internationalised, and we've got an example of our Norwegian one that's internationalised. So first to the Scottish one, and I'd like to introduce, without further afield, Ed Gardine, who is the Managing Director and also founder of Safewell Solutions based in Aberdeenshire. So Ed, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
That's great, thank you. So thanks very much. Good afternoon, Lord Provost, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you today at the Aberdeen Norway Gateway event. I've been doing business in Norway since the 1980s and was involved in the Statoil Sleipner project many years ago. We're obviously living in extraordinary times. No doubt future historians will refer to this period as the COVID-19 era. And obviously we all know what's happened over the last 6 months. You know, life and everyone on Earth has been completely disrupted by an invisible microbe about 0.2 microns in size. And actually, at the end of August, there was 25 million cases, and tragically, about 900,000 people have lost their lives. So we know what the virus has done to the planet, and the economic consequences of it, a severe impact on the health, safety, and well-being of people. And you know, those projects that we've just heard about, it's also been a brake on activity. So obviously it's been a hugely disruptive event in the world. We did think about calling this presentation Dismantling COVID because, I don't know, it feels good now to wash your hands with soap. It's great that soap can kill and dismantle the virus, and hand washing has never been so satisfying. But our feeling is really that hygiene plays an important part, but it's not. It's a lot more complicated than that. And we'd like to explain to you today, you know, what we're doing here at Safewell to develop solutions to help our clients manage and mitigate the risk of COVID in the workplace. And so, you know, why are we involved? Well, you know, for the last 15 to 20 years, we've been involved in helping our clients to breathe clean, safe air, working in hazardous environments. A lot of that's been in the oil and gas sector globally. And, you know, our breathing air systems have been used in thousands of work scopes and onshore as well, petrochemical facilities, refineries. And you'll find case studies on our website. Quite importantly, we've trained many hundreds of people to implement best practice and to manage their own safety. And, you know, I think the most important thing is that we help people understand, become aware of the invisible risks and poor quality breathing air. Now, at the start of this pandemic, there was an awful lot of panic regarding availability of medical equipment, and Safewell was involved in this. We delivered our safe breathing air machines to Babcock International. They were developing new ventilators, and they required high quality medical grade breathing air urgently, and we responded accordingly. So, you know, we've been involved in the response to the pandemic. Could we get the next slide, Stacey? There'll be a couple actually, the next one. Thank you. Yes, so I mean, we are very much in Safewell involved in innovation. We're leading risk management best practice in various areas. And we could have talked today about what we've done in automation and commercial diving globally with Shell and other operators. But we focused today on something that I felt would be of interest to the audience. We have achieved European patent for our innovative breathing air machines. We do believe they've got the highest safety, integrity, and reliability of any breathing air machine globally. But we don't just innovate for innovation's sake. You know, our R&D is very focused on client discovery, and the result of our R&D must produce value clarity, you know, that we can share with our clients and improve the safety and well-being of people. Next slide, please. These are some of our clients. I would say, you know, to summarize this, our approach to risk management is holistic, it's systematic, and it's practical, and it's consistent, and it's based on integrity, which is the most important thing. Any solutions we offer must be capable of validation, and the value delivered must be measurable. And that's strong values, which we will not compromise. And we're educating people, training people, providing the best solutions for managing risk. I think, you know, from my company we'll never offer a solution that we do not ourselves passionately believe in, because lives depend on what we are saying. Next slide, please. So what we're doing is we're taking clients on a journey to what we believe to be best practice, and you know, that can often start off in a place called unknown unknowns, and you know, that can be a worry-free place to be, but you know, being blissfully unaware is not to be recommended. Next slide. So, you know, where does this fit in terms of coronavirus? So, you know, how are we applying this to help people manage coronavirus in the workplace? So, I think it's fair to say the world is now challenged by twin imperatives, and the two imperatives are saving lives and livelihoods. And obviously, we've mentioned earlier today that the economic consequences have been plain to see. Of course, the recession globally, it's very tough for business just now, tough for SMEs. In my business, we didn't furlough anybody. We've had a busy time, so I'm pleased. But a lot of companies have, people have lost their jobs, and people are frightened by the events. They seem beyond their control. And like all microbes, COVID is an invisible enemy. Offices remain empty. People are working from home. This may be sustainable for some businesses, but not for every business. And I guess the key question is, how do we restore confidence? How can we do that? Next slide. Currently in the UK, there's a big drive even today in the House of Commons to get people back into the office. But data shows that people certainly of working age are not that keen to do that. I think responsible employers are developing plans to mitigate the risks, but as we head towards winter in Northern Europe, our view, there's a major gap. Next slide. So, I mean, essentially, we're all familiar with the current risk control advice, but, crucially, there is very little mention of monitoring air quality. Could you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. And, there's no mention of improving ventilation in the workplace. And for months, we've been lobbying government, MPs, unions, and various organizations to recognize the risk of aerosol transmission of COVID in enclosed spaces. Typically indoor, a 5-micron droplet can actually go 10 meters, so it can be suspended for a long time at height. So there's significant potential for inhalation exposure in enclosed spaces to airborne microbes. As we head to in winter in Northern Europe, this risk will increase in enclosed spaces. So we believe that the WHO has been behind the curve on this, but leading engineers like Professor Lydia Morweski have been at the forefront of this research. So we've been working with her. She's appealed to the medical community and the relevant international bodies to recognize the potential for airborne spread of COVID-19 and advocate preventative measures to mitigate the risk. So this risk control debate is moving very fast, and the Wall Street Journal this morning has come out strongly recommending improved ventilation and air purification. Next slide, please. So how do we manage this risk in accordance with a LARP? A LARP is essentially managing risk as low as reasonably practicable. It's a UK HSE term. Employers have a duty of care, and how do they manage the risk, in accordance with the LARP? Next slide, please. So we started our, 5 months ago, our Safe World, Safe Space initiative. Getting data on this is extremely hard, so we decided we'd create our own data, and we'd try and develop practical risk management models at our own premises in Aberdeenshire. So we're actually working with a team of chartered occupational hygienists to develop a robust protocol for indoor air quality monitoring. And these guys are actually working with the Scottish Government as well. Interestingly, we're working with a global media organisation at the moment to implement this protocol in their offices in London, and they're going to spread it out through the world. So major companies are already taking this very seriously. Next slide. We've got a track record in measurement, measuring breathing air quality, and we can deploy a lot of tools to do that. These are just some of the tools that we use. It's possible to generate comprehensive baseline data on the levels of ventilation and general air quality in any enclosed business space. That could be onshore or offshore. The data can then be used to implement a plan to improve air quality and justify a LARP. And we can put that data in the cloud, which is probably an apt place to put it, and easily accessible, so we can use it as benchmark data. The key point here is that when we're measuring any parameter, measuring data, that the equipment is calibrated and the uncertainty of measurement is known. And this is the sort of thing that we're doing daily within the business globally with clients. Next slide, please. And if the data shows that we have got a problem and we need to make improvements, we are also been working on this, and we've been looking at different technologies and basically testing.
Adios, big man.
Yeah. Sorry? Got somebody come in there. So we've been looking at various technologies to mitigate the risk, and we've actually patented a a barrier system based on Coanda effect and vacuum, which could be set up within office spaces to control existing airflows within the offices. So we have got engineered solutions. There's a cost to doing these things, but obviously there's a cost if we do nothing. Next slide. Next slide as well, please. So basically, we analyze data. Our job at Safewell is to provide clients with objectivity when discussing risk management for safe spaces. And in this short presentation today, we don't have time to go into all the various case studies, but the case studies exist, and we could, provide these on request. Next slide. So perhaps we should just conclude by saying that here at Safewell, we're probably the hardest people to sell technology to, because we always ask for data to validate performance. We continually challenge others and ourselves to provide value clarity. So what we're doing at the moment is generating data, analyzing and developing a best practice model. The really key point is it has to have high safety integrity. This is a complex area, and we believe it is possible to engineer risk management solutions based on alert and create safe space in business. There's no such thing as zero risk, but if we make these invisible risks more visible, we can manage this in a completely objective way. So we hope, it's been a bit of a rapid journey, but we hope you found this short presentation of interest, and we look forward to working with you as part of your team to help you manage your invisible risks. Thank you.
Much, Ed, for your presentation. And I agree with you that there's never been a need for the quality of, or the certainty or the comfort of knowing that the air and the quality of the environment we're in is a very, very important commodity at the moment and moving forward. If you have any questions for Ed or any of the other speakers today, please do feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll come back to them. And in the meantime, having looked at a Scottish business that has already done business around the globe and continues to expand globally, Safewell Solutions. Thank you, Safewell Solutions. We're now going to go to a Norwegian company that is established in the UK and growing globally too. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Tony from Rambase. Tony Flanagan is based down in England, but it's also very focused on the whole of the UK, including the oil space. Tony, the floor is yours, Tony.
Thank you. First of all, this is my first gateway. I'd like to thank Brett and for giving me the opportunity to speak today. But also I'd like to thank the previous speakers for their most interesting content and what they've spoke about in terms of in these challenging times. What I want to do is talk a little bit about Rambase and sort of how ERP is shaping sort of future manufacturing for both the equipment rental companies in your sector. Next slide, please. I'd like to give you a little bit of background to myself. My background is I was a maintenance engineer for 20 years, but I've spent the last 25 years working in what we would call ERP software market for the likes of Oracle, HP and Info. And now I'm working with Rambase. Rambase is part of a company called Hatland, which is, I think if you're Norwegian, you'll probably know Hatland as an organisation. They're based in Haugesund, which is not too far from Stavanger in Norway. They was established in the mid-70s. Mainly their background comes from electronics distribution, then moving into manufacturing. And they had a need as an organisation where they have a very good, strong track record in terms of innovation. So, and one of those innovations is Rambase, which is in the 70s, there was no systems as we see today for running business systems, as we call them. And they developed Rambase as an internal solution, which they've now productized and brought to the market very successfully. Next slide, please. Rambase is one of their 4 core companies. RAMBase being a cloud-based ERP solution which focuses at manufacturing and wholesale industry. But today what we're talking about is where RAMBase has helped people in the oil and gas industry. Yeah, EMP Secure is an IT management organization which focuses on digital organizations, but cybersecurity as well, and that's where RAMBase is hosted. Inosa is another solution which is a QMS system which is used widely in the oil and gas industry globally. That as a solution that is also cloud-based, and then you've got Yidra, which is a global organization which is a manufacturer of pump systems. Okay, next slide please. What I'd like to touch on here is the customers that we have with the RAMBase solution, which covers, as you can probably see from here, a lot of your industries, oil and gas, subsea, etc. And obviously the characteristics of these are where you've got high regulation and quality and traceability, which is something that RAMBase handles very well. Next slide, please. So where do we see our customers? And that is really, as I've just said, about where documentation and traceability, and anybody in the oil and gas industry will know that this is a huge demand. Where we've got organizations from quality and precision, but also the traceability that you have, but also going from growth in sort of internationalization and international organizations. And this shows some of our customers. What I'd like to talk about now is just an example, next slide please, of some of the things that the speakers have been talking about this morning, which is what's happening, what the effect that COVID's had. And we've seen a lot of people looking towards companies like Hatline with RAMBase, where lots of people are having to work from home. And one of the things that a cloud-based solution offers you is that facility to be able to work from anywhere. But Wepco, we were an organization who are very much focused in the oil industry. And they've had challenges where they've had to rethink how they do their business in a competitive market. And they were very much, next slide. Sorry. I don't know what's happened there. Sorry, skip the slide. Yeah, sorry about that. This is a video done by Wepco, which I don't want to use today. Don't click on it, please, Stacey, because it's about probably 3 or 4 minutes long, which is probably too long for today. But what it is, I'd recommend that you take the time to just have a look at it on our YouTube channel. And it really, where they're coming from is what they've done as a business, and talking about the focus on what they've got to do in terms of cost and efficiency, and getting more out of what they currently have in a very competitive market, and why they have to do this in terms of being able to survive in a competitive market. And the big thing is being very open about how RAMBase has helped them to do that. And so I would suggest that if you get the opportunity, just to have a look at that on our YouTube channel. Next slide, please. So when we sit down and ask them why they chose them, but the background of where Wepco came from was really on old systems, infrastructure, investment was needed, and when they went to market, they were looking for a solution that could handle complex production, where they are in a sort of very strong make-to-order type environment, where being able to track everything in terms of documentation within one system is one of the things, whereas before they had things all over the place. But from a system being integrated and simplifying their IT infrastructure that they had. Next slide, please. This one here is about another customer of ours, which is TCO. TCO are oil services based in Norway again, but international, both in UK, US and Norway. Very similar to issues to Wetco. Next slide, please. I think I'm going to have a similar problem to this one. I don't know why that's... Can you skip the slide, Stacey? Sorry for this. Again, very similar characteristic to Wetco, where they had lots of different systems internally, different manual processes, and one of the things they found was bringing it within one system gave them the ability to have focus on cost and efficiency, but also from a quality perspective, having inbuilt quality within RAMBase and the ability to track all the documentation and certifications that they have to do has worked really well. And bringing it all together in one place where they can find things very easily and very quickly. Next slide, please. And this is sort of supported by what the production director at TCO said, which is being able to find things in terms of one end of their supply chain to the other, putting everything together and being able to manage that process very clearly. And to be able to get, if you like, the right information at the right time to the right people. Next slide, please. What is RAMBase? RAMBase is a cloud-based ERP solution focused at manufacturing and wholesale distribution businesses. It's a pure SaaS model, but one of the big benefits it brings industry focus and industry functions and functionality, which will scale from small companies up to medium. We focused at tier 2 and tier 3, but and it's owned by Hatland, where we host it and promote it. We implement it through a network of certified partners. But the big thing, it enables you to focus on your core business. Next slide, please. It's a modular system, and certainly for the oil and gas industry, the sort of the quality and documentation modules, along with rental and production, are integrated really right from CRM initial contact with any prospect, right the way through to finance at the end. So it's very modular, cloud-based. Next slide, please. In terms of the oil and gas industry, very specific industries, we have a number of customers using it in the oil and energy, and with QMS, serial traceability being key, rental, and as I say, the amount of documentation that's held in the oil and gas industry, we have a very strong documentation solution to handling that. Next slide, please. The key is to get the right information to the right person at the right time. Next slide. And I would like to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak. And there's resources here. If you look at the slide deck, where you can look at customer case studies, some white papers. My contact details are here, and our website. Next slide, please. I would like to thank everybody for their time this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more of you in RAMBase, not just in the UK, but up in Aberdeen and in the oil sphere as well. So absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you to all our speakers today. A couple of items before we move to the Q&A. If you're not joining us tomorrow and you want to continue to explore overseas markets, our next gateway dates for you to save the date is our Abu Dhabi UAE gateway, which will be running on Tuesday the 10th and Wednesday the 11th of November, which is the week where, of course, ADIPEC would have sat. So similar to what we're doing today with Norway and what we did with Houston the week the oil show would have been. If you'd like more details on that, feel free to contact myself or Stacey. We will be sending an Eventbrite link in the thank you notes that come out on Friday this week. Okay, I'd also like to give a special mention to the Chamber. Our friends there are running a session later this afternoon. That's one of the reasons why we're going to conclude the Q&A by no later than 2:20, 2:15, in case anyone wants to join the market briefing from the Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, which is at 2:30 today. Tomorrow, if you've not already registered for tomorrow, please do register if you'd like to join us tomorrow. It's not the same session, it's a totally different session with 4 brand new speakers tomorrow, Thursday, the 3rd of September, same time, 1 o'clock UK time, 2 o'clock Norwegian time. Okay, so now any questions for any of our speakers today, please feel free to pop them in the chat just now, or alternatively, if you would like us to unmute you to ask your question, we can also do that. So either pop them in the chat or let myself or Stacey know that you'd like to ask a question.
And just while we're waiting for some questions to come in, to everybody and to our speakers, I will put all the presentations in the group. So in the email that I sent, and we'll also send again tomorrow and Friday, is a link to the group if you want to join it. Tony, if you can send me a link to your video separately, I'll do that as a separate post in the chat as well, and then people can see it as well.
Yeah, no problem.
So that means that we don't have to miss out on that. I am having a look through, I'm not seeing questions yet, so if anybody's got any questions, if you want to add them in, we do still have some time.
Yes.
I'm just making sure I've not missed any. I have a few introductions in the chat if anybody wants to connect with anybody.
Do we have a question for any of our speakers?
No, but a lot of people saying how informative it is and how they've enjoyed it. So I think you guys have been very thorough today, which has been really good. Well done.
Yeah, thanks for all the feedback. We really appreciate the feedback. It's obviously very useful for us.
Okay.
Ed, can I ask a question to yourself on safe space and safe raw solutions while we're waiting for any other questions? And I guess, Ed, the thing is that particularly in the Northeast and in the Aberdeen hub and in the Norway, we've taken clean air and good quality air as almost just a given, not like some other places around the globe. And in a way, the environments and the space that they breathe are going to become an ever more precious commodity. And you know, how do you think? You mentioned about media companies, you mentioned about offices. Do you think it's a broad range of industries that need to address this in terms of making their staff feel safe to move back to offices? We know the government's telling people to get back to offices, but as you say, when you actually ask the big companies, the view is that it's not going to happen for a while yet. So how, you know, is there some sectors that need to be prioritised, do you think?
I think a lot of the large case numbers are coming from the food industry at the moment, and you know, I suppose it's ironic that the food industry does practice, you know, very good hygiene. I think it's the invisible nature of the risk. You know, we've been going on about this for quite a few years, Brett, as you know, in relation to breathing air, and I think it's very hard for people to manage the invisible risk. That's why I emphasize that we have to generate, we have to be able to measure that risk, and we have to, you know, generate some data so we can actually manage the risk. I think, you know, the evidence is becoming clear, just even in August, just a few weeks ago, some of the latest science that's being published about aerosol transmission, this 1 to 2 meter that everybody was going on about and obsessed about, was actually, you know, a bit of a red herring, because in enclosed spaces, natural ventilation and also, your HVAC system will actually, make currents of air within your enclosed offices that will propel these aerosol particles much further than 1 to 2 meters. They've picked it up 10 meters away and they found it, suspended as well. So I think it's general to all industries and all sectors that they have to think about these risks.
Yes, and even this week we've seen, I think I'd agree with you, the food sector when it happens, it seems to happen in quite large numbers, but we've also seen some stories of flights this week and possibly even, a situation, I guess, an environment where people would normally feel, oh, I'm on holiday, I'm quite relaxed, and
yes,
very easy to forget about the invisible risk, isn't it?
It's strange the way humans react to this. I mean, one of my friends was that, he's back playing golf, but he won't go into the clubhouse. And, the reason for that is he won't go into an enclosed space until he's absolutely confident that he's not going to catch the COVID. But I think someone had accused him of being a chicken, and this is, very strange the way humans react to this. I don't think there's anything brave about exposing yourself to this type of risk at all. So, I've always said when we train, people globally on breathing air that it doesn't matter how physically strong you are. If you, actually get contaminated with something, it brings the biggest, man down or biggest woman. It doesn't really matter what you look like on the outside. It's the invisible risk inside you. So
anyone wants to discuss their air or their environment, or making spaces safer, they can connect with you on LinkedIn.
Excellent.
So we do have a couple of questions which I'm going to try and run through quickly so that so that we don't miss out. But there's also more coming in. Just push my questions away. So the first one has come from David McGrath. And he said he sees a strong CAPEX development programme. How does this square off against the environmental agenda? Can anybody answer that?
Stacey, could you just read? I know, David. Could you ask his question again, just so I could?
Sure. I see a strong CAPEX development programme. CAPEX, sorry, did I pronounce it wrong? CAPEX development programme. How does this square off against the environmental agenda?
I would say that's a good question for either Leif or Richard at the Norway end, because we know there's CAPEX on the shelf, but there's also an energy transition programme happening at the same time. Leif, are you still with us? If not, Richard?
I mean, I think that's a very interesting point. I think certainly the British government is looking for a bit more balance in where CAPEX is directed. Clearly, there is investment on the shelf and there is investment on the shelf, and that which is aimed at cleaner production, keeping existing wells going, but extracting in a less environmentally polluting way. That is, if you're on an environmental agenda, that is good CAPEX, good investment. But equally, the companies, the majors, are very keen to portray themselves as broad energy companies, to borrow a phrase from one of them. And yet the proportion of the CAPEX going into renewable energy is, I think, smaller than many of us would like to see. So there are enormous amounts of CAPEX and investment capital available, and much of it is going in a good direction on oil and gas, in kind of good sustainable technology, and but there isn't, I think, as much as we would like to see going into new technology and renewables. I hope that answered the question a bit.
Thanks. Maybe I could just ask, thank you for that, Richard. Could I maybe also ask the Lord Provost if he's with us, because obviously Aberdeen's done its own efforts in terms of AREG and hydrogen and trying to balance the portfolio while still valuing oil and gas. Lord Provost, do you have any thoughts on that? I'm not sure.
We had to go for the next presentation.
Go for this next meeting. Hopefully that helped, David, and thanks for joining us today.
And if anybody wants clarification, any more questions, feel free to pop them in the group, and we can ask the speakers to respond as well, so that everybody can see them. I'll ask another question. I see some more messages, but I'll check them after. This one's from Jim Shiak from JS Resources. Ed, this is directed at you. So what are the barriers to your technologies being introduced to Norway and the UK?
Hi, Jim. How are you doing? I don't think there are any barriers really, Jim. You know, we're already doing business in Norway, and you know, our breathing air machines have been in Norway working. I don't think there are any barriers. I guess that answers the question. We work very hard to achieve compliance with standards. So our breathing air machine is compliant with NORSOK standards. And we can obviously prove that, we can validate that. So, you know, we aim high when we go for compliance. So I don't think there's any barriers.
Okay, thanks for that. Stacey, do you want to move on to the next question?
I don't think I've missed any. I think the rest is all thanks, and it's probably good timing because we do have
perfect timing, because I'm conscious that it's 2:10.
Yeah.
We only have a few more minutes because we want to make sure that everyone that is joining the Chamber Norway session at 2:30 has time to log on and get a quick cup of coffee beforehand. So I think without further ado, I would like to thank all of our speakers today. Some excellent information. Thanks to many people for joining us and interacting. And we hope you can all join us again tomorrow. You're very welcome for brand new speakers. And if you haven't registered and you need to register, feel free to message myself or Stacey, and we can.
Well, the joining instructions for day 2 will be going out, and they'll actually just go to everybody as well, just in case. So if you haven't registered, then you can register, but the link will also be there. So we hope to see you tomorrow.
Yeah, feel free to share the link to anybody you feel might find this session of use or value. Okay, so without further ado, thank you, Lord Provost. Thank you, Ambassador. And thank you, ONS. Thank you, Rambase. Thank you, Safewell. And our supporters today, SDI, EIC, and the City of Aberdeen. And without further ado, I think thanks, Stacey, also for moderating an excellent session. And we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
Thank you. See you all tomorrow, guys.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.